very excited about the visit of Dr. Yusri. Please, Doctor, have a seat. As I said, it's a blessing from God, and that He accepted this invitation, and He's coming with a material that's really, really, really important for us, and not only just materials, but also experience and wisdom in such a context. So we pray that God uses this. Of course, we can always learn about parenthood, and we can never learn enough about parenthood. So we thank God for this opportunity, and it's good that you are here. Hopefully more people will benefit from this opportunity. The schedule of the visit is you always have it, or it's outside available, and it's on the website too. Two things that I want to just remind you is, if you have any question during the talk, you will find small pieces of paper and pens, and if there isn't enough, they will bring us more. So you write questions, and we'll collect the questions. There will be questions and answers in the end. Questions are very important. The other thing is, if anyone wants to have a private session or a counseling session with Dr. Yusri, you can always let Ihab know. He will be outside waiting. Take any names, and we'll have an appointment for marital or parenting. He's available the entire week. He's graciously given us an entire week for that. So we're very thankful for this opportunity. So please welcome him, and let's get what God is giving us through him. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Abuna. Thank you all for coming this evening. I'm sure that you are all interested to listen about one of the most critical stages of development, human development, because teenage, as you know, is one of the most critical times of all our life. And today, or this evening, actually, we are going to take the first part of teenage, because usually we divide teenage into 2 or even 3 stages or mini stages. We can consider the first stage starting at age 11 or 12 to age 14, and then a second stage from 14 to 16, and the third stage from 16 to 20 or 22. But actually we are going... Shukran. Thank you. We are dividing teenage in our presentations into 2 stages, early teens and late teens. When I talk about early teens, I mean we're going to address from age 11 or 12 through age 16. Or actually 15, but until the end of 15. By age 16, usually teenagers grow a little bit and move into another stage which we call late teens. Let me start with one of the very important verses in the Bible, which is in the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 12, verse 1. Remember now your Creator in the days of your youth, before the difficult days come, and the years draw near, when you say, I have no pleasure in them. Actually, we often forget about this very important verse in the Bible. And we learn that from the mouth of a very wise man who was known of his wisdom, King Solomon. And he came to that conclusion near the end of his life that the most important time to know God is when we are young. If we miss out such an opportunity to know God, it will be very hard later on in life. And if you ask me a question about what do you think, what's going on with our youth and young people before marriage and after marriage, what's going on with them these days, I will tell you that the problem happened early in their teenage. But actually, I would rather be more assertive by saying that the problem starts very, very early in life, when they lack Christian education and good manner upbringing. But the result is always the same. Once they do not know God early in their lives, later on they start to pay a price from their social life, emotional health, mental health, etc. So we need to emphasize that verse. Remember now, right now, your Creator in the days of your youth. And I see here a key word in this verse, the word now. Now. If you remember the last Sunday's passage, the gospel passage, the story or the parable of the prodigal son, and he said to himself, now I arise and go back to my father. Now. So we have to remember this word now, because it's always a problem with our teenagers in general. They like to postpone. They like to procrastinate, to wait for a longer time. Let me enjoy my life now, and then later on I'm going to confess or repent. So, if we understand our teenage will be winners, all of us. Who needs to understand teenage? First, parents. Parents are the most important people in any person's life. Of course. Because, children are born like a new computer, new laptop. You buy this new laptop from the store, and who is going to feed and download the information and the experience in the minds of our young people? Our children, our toddlers, our infants. It comes always from parents. However, parents, after some time, they start to give the control or the leadership more to the society outside, represented in school, in teachers, educators, and church, Sunday school teachers, servants. Those are the people who need to know and to understand all about what's about teenage. So I hope that we all listen carefully to what we are going to hear this evening. Let us see how we develop. Human life is about developmental stages, like most psychologists and educators mentioned. It's all like stages, We are born, we are infants, newly born, and then we become toddlers, and then young children, and then older children, and then teenagers, and then young adults, and then adults, then go into midlife, then start to go into old age. So it's all about stages, and each stage has its own characteristics and features, Of course, when you deal with an infant, it's completely different than when you deal with a young child or an older child, of course, in every way. And then the third thing is about different sets of needs. You know, our teenagers, they have their own needs. They have specific needs. We need to be aware of that. And number 4, different sets of expectations. What do we expect from them? Sometimes we expect too much from teenagers. Like we expect a teenager who is like 13 or 14 behave like an adult. This is a big mistake. Sometimes we treat a 14 or 15-year-old like a young child. That's another mistake. So we need to know what do we expect from them and let them also fulfill their own expectations, because that's one major thing with teenagers. If they do not fulfill their expectations, or if they have unrealistic expectations, they start to develop what's called frustration. And frustration would put them in a very, very unfortunate situation with temper problems, anger, and so on. Number 5, different tasks, different tasks. Like, the task for a young baby, for example, we teach a young baby how to start to become independent from mother, weaning, speaking, and walking, and everything like that, But what about a teenage? What about the teenager? What do we expect, or what is the task for them to do and to accomplish, especially during early teens? That's something that we will come to. I'm just putting some objectives here of our presentation. And then different challenges, of course. The challenges that face teenage, we know, we are very aware of, but we're going to be more specific about these challenges. And then the last thing is different approaches. How do we approach those problems and those challenges that develop with our teenagers? So if you put all these 7 points in front, we just will keep always focused on one or the other of them. Then we go into the 2 major things that shape our life, which is called nature and nurture. Nature means something that we have very little control, if any, control over our development. Like what? What's about nature? What we call it the genetic element, Genes. We are born, like when you buy a new computer from the store, it carries the basics of information on that computer, so that we can work through that computer. We can use it. But use it to what? Use it through downloading information. So the genes are things that are naturally there. We are born with our genetic factors, with our inherited factors. But let me ask you a question here. How much do we inherit? Some people blame many things, especially with young teenagers, on heredity. And you hear that sometimes, like a young boy or a young girl may start to come with questions, say, maybe I am gay, or I am a lesbian, I am a homosexual. Because the society around us is teaching them that information in a wrong way. Of course, false. It's all false and fake. It's all justifications of the wrong behavior when we teach or we tell them that homosexuality is genetic, of course. No. Or sometimes we say, we talk a mothers may come and complain of her teenagers and say they are like their dad. Their dad is always angry, has a temper problem. They inherited temper problems from their dad. No. Even we call that, we talk about that describing the behavior even of a toddler, like 3-year-old who is very nervous, very hyper or something like that, and say, look, he inherited that trait or that behavior from his dad or his mom. This is completely wrong. Of course not. We inherit minimal things. And then the rest of the story comes after that. But such inherited things come because may happen because of something that happened during pregnancy. Like, that's why we say, ladies who are becoming pregnant, they have to take care of themselves very well, especially with taking medication, any medications, with taking some more rest and vitamins and all these health things. They need to be careful about that, these health factors and behaviors that may impact the life of the child later on. But when it comes to nature, number 2, nature is about exposure. It's all about exposure. Exposure to what? Number 1, exposure to parents. Listen, there are many things that our children are exposed to after birth. The first thing is coming from their parents. Would you ask me and say, is it that important that a child is exposed and will be shaped, his personality or her personality will be shaped up according to what they learn from the parents? Of course. And let me tell you something here about parents and family, especially parents, number 2, family. Each one of us, to be honest, has developed through exposure 2 creeds. We know one creed, the creed of faith. We believe in one God, God the Father, the Pantocrator, created heaven and earth. That's the creed of faith that we received in church. But actually, every human being, each one of us, we all have another personal creed. We received that creed from our parents very, very early in life. That's why, our children who may become later on depressed may probably receive the traits of depression or worry or anxiety or one or the other of those behaviors from their parents, because they lived in a home where someone was depressed all the time, someone had temper all the time, someone was kind of nervous or anxious, anything like that. And we end up with another creed. It's called in psychology the belief system. The belief. We all believe very strongly in what we have learned from our parents. And this is the difficulty when you come to a stage when you need to modify or change someone's behavior. You are stuck with that because it's hard to change a creed. If they come and ask me, can you change your Orthodox creed? Of course I say no. The same will happen when it comes to changing the creed that I received or the belief system that I received from my parents. This will add more responsibility to all parents, especially parents of young kids in their early childhood, to be careful when they raise their young children. Family, brothers, sisters, siblings, uncle, aunt, grandfather, grandmother, all of this. Number 3, after family, is media. Why media? Why did I put it number 3? Because media is actually the first thing that a baby, or a toddler, may watch at home. You remember when we used to help them to stay quiet and be busy with something so we can do our business at home? We turn on the TV and let them watch cartoon and say, oh, cartoon is safe. Who told you that? It's not always safe. Watch anything, watch like say Disney Channel, for example. Who said that everything on Disney Channel is safe or Christian? Of course not. So, but this is the way they watch television at a very early stage, and then this television starts to become later on this thing, computer, the internet, and we're coming soon to that. Then they go to school. School has a very strong influence on kids, especially when they are exposed to some intense experience, like experiencing sexual abuse at a very early stage of life, age 5 and 6 in preschool or kindergarten. Then exposure to peers, school, and then peers, then friends, and then church. And you'll ask me a question here, what is the difference between peers and friends? No, there is a difference. Peers are everybody around us is like peers, They go to school, they go into a classroom, and all are peers. They listen to them talking, they listen to them behaving or acting, and they start to be influenced by that. But friends are special friends. When they say, Dad, Mom, I want to go and spend overnight with my friend, or bring some of my friends here and spend overnight here. These are intimate friends. They spend more time. They have fun together. They feel closer to them. So we have peers and we have friends. And then we have the church. And church, of course, even if it comes at the end, it should have the upper hand, the highest, because church is the institution of God on earth. That's how we can let God's word and God's instructions and commandments reach to these young, vulnerable children, especially at teenage. Okay, then we go into those major events, other factors. How does a teenager's life be shaped? How does it get shaped? It gets shaped by, first thing, by the early life things that happen very early in life, whether good or bad. If they were bad, then these teenagers will suffer. What is the percentage? I can easily say 100% they are going to suffer. Examples of early life trauma. What do you think? Like what? Child abuse. When I hear someone saying to me, I used to be hit or beaten or abused by my father or by my mother, punished, abused, can traumatize the child's life, and such trauma can last with the child for a very, very long time. Same happens with sexual abuse. When a child is being molested at a very early stage of his life or her life, especially girls. Verbal abuse, emotional abuse, when our children are not receiving enough validation and affirmation. Some of us are very, very stringent and very, very short of giving their children enough compliment and praise. Some of us are very perfectionistic. We never say good words to our children, even if they do their best. Even if they come home with the best results, I will always say, you're still imperfect because you need to do more and more. And they start to feel that burden of low self-esteem later on in life, as we will see. Second thing, how have they been raised? Your children been raised with a balance between love and firmness or structure. When you treat your child, how would you raise your child? Love is important. It's not important. It's essential. Children die without life. Literally die. I mean, if babies do not receive love and nurture of love and bonding with their parents, especially their mom, in the very, very early stages of life, they are very vulnerable. They can die easily from any disease or illness. So love is important, but love alone only is not enough. Do you know why? Because if we just apply love, we say God is love, that's fine. But God also is structuring us through the commandment. He put to us boundaries and limitations. And He said, you cannot do this, you cannot do that. If you do that, you are in violation of love. And that's how we need both of them, love and structure. Third thing is about what's called ranking. You know ranking? Child ranking. I mean, this is something we manipulate without even realizing that we do that. Sometimes we take care of the older child or the oldest because he or she is the firstborn, and we ignore the young. Or vice versa. Sometimes the old may be neglected once he or she may have a sister or a brother. What about the middle child syndrome? That's another thing that needs to talk about at one point. If not today, but at least we hear about this middle child syndrome. Middle children are very vulnerable to suffer, and they end up with becoming either the black sheep of the family or the blessing of the family to compensate for the lack of attention they received from their parents. What about gender differences? Do you make some differences between boys and girls? Another thing, I mean, how do you treat boys? How do you treat girls? These are all factors that shape our teenagers' lives. Then the fourth thing here, which is extremely important, is about role modeling. Role modeling. What do I mean by role modeling? I mean, whatever you want to do, whatever you may do with your children, they still look up to you as a parent or as a Sunday school servant or teacher or leader or anybody, and they start to look and wonder, what are you doing? Why are you doing something and you are asking me to do something different? Are you a role model? Are you a role model? When you visit a teenager's room, sometimes you find pictures hanging on the wall. Many of those pictures are just represent their role models, their heroes. And you know, in our society, heroes are all about what? Actors, Hollywood figures, sports figures, you know, singers, dancers, and so on. But we love to see our children looking up to see dad and mom are their heroes, until they see even better heroes in the Lord Jesus Himself or in Saint Mary or other saints. This is great. And it's good in our church we magnify and reinforce this kind of leadership and role modeling for our children, our kids in general. So when we do something wrong in front of our teenagers, we let them stumble even unintentionally. Especially, if it comes to you tell them, you don't smoke. And then they say, well, look who's talking, you know. Or you say, son, I start smoking at age 25. You want to tell me that you want to smoke at age 12 and 13? Well, what kind of a message you are telling him? Just you smoke, but not right now? I am big enough to smoke. And so on. drinking, all of this stuff that we do sometimes and forget that we have young teenagers at home waiting to see what we are going to do. And by the way, before I forget, let me tell you something specific about this teenage. Teenagers do not have what we call the gray area. Do you know the gray area? Everything they look at is either black or white. They don't have a black area, or the gray area. But when we grow, we start to see things in a different way. That sometimes what is white for me today may be black tomorrow. What is black for me today may become white tomorrow. That's why we have to be careful. When we talk about such things like, if is alcohol bad or good? You can't say alcohol is bad. You have to teach them is alcohol and substance in general is good. Is sex bad or good? Sex itself is good, but it depends. It depends how you would use it. How would you use sex? How would you use substance and everything? How would you use drugs? These are all were created. They were all created to be good and to be beneficial to human beings, But this depends on how we use them. So our teenagers might not understand that easily. But be careful when we deal with such things, because they can stumble because of lack of role modeling. Okay, now we start to talk more about the problems they face. What kind of problems? Actually, teenagers, they have problems coming from within, from inside, developmental, natural, physiological problems or issues, and then they have also the pressures that come from outside. Let us talk a little bit in detail about each one of those. Teenage, actually, the pressures from inside are about what we call the change. Teenage is about change, and any changes in human life carries always some risk, some pressure, some stress. And they change in every aspect. Teenagers change from childhood to become adults. So they start to see their bodies start to grow. This physical aspect, of growing. Then the second thing is about the sexual maturity. And then the third thing about starting to feel little detached from their families. Because they grow, they start to feel themselves as independent from their families. They were still 10 and 11 and 12, they were still children. They used to hold our hands as parents, especially when it comes to cross a traffic light, or walking through something. They always used to hold our hands. Now they don't want to do that. They feel independent. They want to spend more time with their peers and friends, and outside they want to spend more time in church. So these four aspects change: the growing change, the maturity change, and the detachment change. All these aspects and all these changes affect their lives in different ways. But the most important thing is what we call the personality issues, because they stumble with their identity and the conflicts with their self-image. Do you know why? Poor teenagers, really, you feel bad for them. And of course, we used to feel bad for ourselves when we were in their age, Why? Because we didn't know who we are. Who am I? Am I a child or an adult? You know, you see your daughter who is now like 11 or 12 or 13, and she's like a sweet, nice lady, but she still likes to play like children. And then she hears you as a parent say, "Stop it. You are not child anymore." And the next day, you see her just going and imitating her mom, starts to do some makeup and maquillage and all of this stuff. Say, "Oh, come on, you're still young. Why? What are you doing?" You know. So they get confused, and they ask this question all the time. That's how they stumble and they struggle with their identity. They don't know who they are. They don't know even in the beginning whether they are boys or girls. They become confused. And that's one major thing that we need to pay attention to, because that's one objective. By the end of our teen age, we have to reach our identity. We know whether we are boys, we are girls, what are we going to be like, you know, and such things that help us with our identity. The conflict with self-image is also another big factor, because they conflict with their self-image all the time, whether they are good or bad, good Christian, bad Christians, bad girls, bad boys, good girls, good boys. All this stuff is coming all the time in their lives. And you know, when they look into the mirror, sometimes they hate themselves. They don't like themselves sometimes. Sometimes they do like themselves. And no wonder why our teenagers at this stage may like to go into their bedrooms and close the door and be by themselves, or cry. And they have these mood swings all the time. Sometimes they feel bad, sometimes they feel good, sometimes they like to joke and laugh, and sometimes they are just masked faced and very depressed. Very tough on them. And it's all our job to help them deal with these changes in their lives. Physical growing, for example, here, they need to understand what's going on with my life and with my body. And they like to watch themselves growing. They like to measure their length all the time, how tall they are, gaining length, and they measure their weights and so on. But they are more confused about these sexual changes that turn them or convert them from children to young adults, male or female. They need to understand what's behind all these changes. For the boy, the hair coming into his face, the mustache, and you know, his body is becoming more hairy. The girl is with her, breasts growing, and also the hair, and this starting of sexual activity, the secretion of the semen in the boy, and the girl with her monthly period, and all this stuff. They start to, probably they take it easily, but most of the time it's confusing for them, and they need to understand. So if you look at this slide, you will see turmoil going on at every aspect and in every way, physically, sexually, and emotionally and mentally. They stumble even with their intelligence. In the beginning, you notice that kids at grade 6 and 7, sometimes their grades in school may go a little bit down. No problem. Soon they will pick up on intelligence, and their intelligence will grow, and the brain will grow, until the brain reaches its full growth by early teens, which is called the part which is called the prefrontal lobe, or the prefrontal brain, where the centers of self-control will grow and have the master over all functions of life. And then, so this perception of being adults or children needs also to be resolved. Okay, let us see the pressures from outside. Pressures from outside, we are familiar with these pressures. The first one comes from parents. You know, if parents are no good, if home is divided on itself, okay? Second thing is lack of sexual education, healthy sexual education. The third major thing is exposure to peer pressure, and the fourth major thing is exposure to media. Parenting. Of course, parenting is extremely important for teenagers. They need structure at this time. They need to know that everything has time. They need to learn freedom, but in responsibility. They need to understand responsible freedom. Parenting is important in role modeling because, you know, our kids during the first 12 years of age, they identify with the different gender parent. Let me explain that. This is very important. Pay attention, please, here. You notice that girls from age 0 to age 12, they are in love with their dads. Boys, opposite. Age 0 to 12, they are in love with their moms. This is good. This is healthy. We need both parents to be at home. Homes without, or I mean, with one parent, single parent homes are very, very vulnerable to many problems later on in their lives, including homosexuality. So, our children, when they are young, they like to understand the other gender through the other gender or the different gender parent. And girls would see in their fathers a small image or a future image of their future husbands and their future sons if they give birth to sons. Boys, same thing. They look up to their mom and they see in them subconsciously the image of the future wife. That's good. This is healthy. Once they hit age 12 or starting the teenage, they need to shift. Boys need to go to their fathers. Girls need to go to their moms. Why? Because they need to learn how to become same gender. Boys need to know how to become men, and girls need to know how to become women and lady, girls. So, we have to help them with that. I mean, many of those problems happen because a mother is still stuck with her 14 and 15-year-old son. And she may come and say, because his dad is always busy, I'm taking care of him, even for the very private things that are related to his sexuality, for example. You think this is good? No, it's not good. It's not the job of a mother to teach her son, her teenage son, about sex and sexual relationship. It even sounds weird for the boy at this age. But it's the father's job. And vice versa, the same happens. The same thing with a father. I mean, sometimes they say just, my wife is so ignorant. I have to take care of all this sexual education with my girls. She is now 13 and 14 and 15. This is wrong. And this can create future problems with intimacy when it comes to age of marriage. It leads to something called emotional incest in future relationships, and this can negatively influence your child's marriage later on. We don't want to be distracted in that subject right now, but I'm telling you these consequences, such consequences that may happen because of forgetting our job to be good parents? Lack or distorted parenting? What about lack of sexual education? And that's probably one topic that we are going to give some time in the coming days. But I'm saying one word here, because you will see now how our teenagers are becoming misinformed every day about sex. And what are the messages they receive every day about sex? We'll see that in very short time. Exposure to peer pressure. And that's another very important issue here today. Because I will tell you something now about the language of young teenagers. What do they talk? How do they speak to each other in schools? And then exposure to the media. So the dangerous world now, at this age, the following slide, is about starting with increasing role of friends and peers. And then the second thing is about experimenting and risk-taking. This is the age where and when our children start to experiment with dangerous things. When I used just to practice my job as an addiction counselor, and we take the history, most of our addicts in our society, they tell us this fact. The first time I used happened when I was 12 or 13 or 14. Most of them. Okay? So, experimenting with drugs, with alcohol, with sex, with pornography, with all this stuff, happened with that age. Understanding relationships, of course, they don't understand what is meant by a relationship because they are still young. For them, the relationship between a boy and girl, what they call it boyfriend or girlfriend, or dating if they can't call it, but they don't talk about dating serious like the next stage. But relationship for them is about fun. All about fun, And life as a whole is a sort of fun. It's fun. Fun to have a girl, fun to play sex with someone else, fun to use drugs, fun to test with alcohol, and so on. These are dangerous because what happens with these teenagers? They may like it. If they test anything of that and they fall in love with what they do, it will be very hard. Not only that, our young teenagers who start, for example, to experiment with sex, for example, like even simple things like kissing, French kissing, making out, all this stuff, with each other. I'm not talking about the regular things that happen once in a while. In most teenagers, especially boys, like self-stimulation, masturbation, things like that. I'm talking about another advanced stage, much more than that, especially between boys and girls or boys and girls. And this thing is not fun because it can lead to serious consequences, very, very dangerous consequences. And by the way, in their sexual development, young teenagers, especially age 11, 12, and 13, they start that time with being so close to their peers of the same gender. You see boys and boys forming clusters like that. Girls and girls are so close to each other. And by the way, boys hate girls at that stage, and girls hate boys at that stage. There is some sort of animosity. And psychologists, took some time to try to understand, but actually I heard something to explain that. That's probably said it's God's plan or nature's plan to protect teenagers from the upcoming impulses, strong sexual impulses that will drive them crazy to seek their other gender peers. So, say from age 11 to 12 and 13, boys are very close to boys. They spend time together, they play together, they want to spend overnight together. Same with girls. They don't ask for boys. But that's dangerous also. You know why? Because if you let your teenage at age 11, 12, 13 spend overnight with somebody else who may have some more experience one way or the other, such experience will be transmitted into your child's life. You know, and I hear those stories all the time. You know, it happened when I was 10, it happened when I was 11, 13, 14. Somebody did that to me and touched me, and so on. Of all of this stuff happens especially during that time, especially this sexual experience, especially when your son or your daughter is spending more time than enough than with someone who is 2, 3, 4 years older. I mean, when you say, my 12-year-older girl is spending her day all the time with a 16-year-old girl, that's unfair. This is dangerous. Same with a boy. Because, you know, the 16 years old has much more experience, especially in terms of sexual development. So when you let 16 years old be with your child, you don't know. You don't know what will happen. Something may happen. So let us see the teen language now. What kind of language do they say? You know, you will laugh about that. Okay. First thing they say, let us have fun. Second thing they say, it's cool. Third thing they say, it feels good. Fourth, that's when they talk to each other. Are you chicken? By the way, they are very sensitive to anybody who criticizes them. And I was giving a similar lecture recently in Florida. I was telling parents something that we need to remember here. Before I forget, there is one unforgivable sin for a teenager that you as a parent may commit, or you as a church counselor may commit. You know what? When you criticize your teenager in front of somebody else, this hurts them a lot. A lot. You know, please avoid criticizing any teenager in front of anybody else, even parents, even brothers and sisters. And then, don't worry, it won't hurt you. And then, just enjoy it. That's the way they interact with each other. That's the language they use. Let me give you another set of language. Okay. The second one, they all do it. They all do it. Because this makes them feel like abnormal. I mean, if you don't practice this thing, then you are abnormal because everybody else is doing that. I hear that every now and then. They come and tell me, I went one day to a church retreat and I found everybody is doing that. Everybody was doing this, you know, and I felt abnormal. Even in church, because they talk to each other like that in church. Then they may say, it's the North American way. It's the American way, Canadian way, you know. Number 3 here, just try it once. That's the peer pressure. Just try it once. Don't do it again. And you know, teenagers like to feel everybody's doing that. That's one reason why they encourage each other to do the same behavior. You know why? Because they feel bad deeply. They have deep guilt about what they are doing because they lost control over their actions. And that's how they say, just try it once, because if you try it once, you will be like me. Sometimes they use another language. You are big enough. Sometimes they will say, to empower the person in a negative way, no one will know it. No one will know. If you have a teenager at home, did you ever, or have you ever heard that teenager saying to you, Dad, Mom, you don't understand? Well, we always say that we have stereotypes. We develop with stereotypes when we were young. The first thing that we say when we were just toddlers, after saying Baba, Mama, Dad, Mom, no, that's the first word we say when we are very young, no, because it gives us a sense of power, especially when I hear Mom is saying no to Dad, and children will feel like no means power. And they keep that saying no over the years. And then they say why? Because they are very curious. And once they hit this teenage, they say, Dad, Mom, you don't understand. You belong to another planet. You are not from here. So the serious contemporary dangers for our teenagers, and that's another important stuff, that our teenagers these days like to avoid reality. You know why? Do you know why? Because reality is tough. It's hard. Sometimes it's painful. When you deal with reality, it means that I have to be responsible. I don't want to accept responsibility. The second thing is confusing reality with virtuality. And this is the biggest and the hardest stuff that we are dealing with today. If you ask me about what's all about this stuff called the internet, the Facebook, MySpace, all this stuff, it's about taking our children away from reality into a virtual world, because the word virtual is very close to the word real, but it's different. In language, real is not virtual and virtual is not real. Virtual is so similar to real. Like, what is the best example of that? Just go home and try to watch any good movie. And you interact with the movie. You cry, you get nervous, your heartbeats will be fast. And you react to the movie like a real thing. And you forget that this real movie is fiction. Is just man-made stuff. But that's how we enjoy virtuality sometimes. It gives us a break from reality, which might not be bad if we do it in a wise way, in a Christian way. But for teenagers, they don't have these boundaries and limitations. So they fall in love with virtual things, as we will see. The third thing is following the majority. Everybody's doing that. And then following the trend or the fashion. It's the fashion. And by the way, young teenagers, you'll probably see that when we talk more about older teenagers, they follow the fashion, they follow the trend. It starts at age 14 and 15. They boys like to let their hair become long and, have their beard and mustache and all this stuff. And then they start to try to find their identity through piercing something in their ears, ear piercing, and so, all this stuff